Hi, I'm Adam.
And I'm Kara. Welcome back to Crunchy Cozy Games.
So let me set the scene for you here. You've got a brand new board game. You bring it home, you take it out of the shrink wrap, you punch all the pieces. You're excited to start playing, but there's these little things that just irk you. So today we are talking about our board game pet peeves.
Those just little things that just irritate you just ever so slightly, or maybe even a lot.
Yeah, they're not things that necessarily break the game, but they are things that you just wish, this little touch would have just fixed so many things for me.
Absolutely.
So let's dive into what I think is one of the most prominent problems in a lot of board games, and that is a bad rule book. So, as I mentioned, one of my favorite aspects of getting a brand new board game is that moment where you take off the lid, you see everything that you've got to punch, you want to read the rule book, figure out how it's played, you've heard a lot about it, and now you want to bring it to the table and you want to invest the time into making this game a new staple into your collection. The worst part about that is when you sit down with that rule book and it's confusing or it doesn't make a lot of sense, or it's one of those things where every time you learn a new mechanism, it's like, oh, see page 46 for more details on this. And you can't get a good through line of the directions.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said for how we're defining bad, because there are definitely like levels of bad here.
Right.
The excessive flipping back and forth is an irritant, but doesn't, like you said, it doesn't break the game.
Well, and in some cases, I understand why they have to do that. I would say, especially in the rise of Kickstarter, is there's a lot of games that get shipped with grammatical errors or even spelling errors, and that tends to kind of annoy me just because...
Yeah, it's like, couldn't you proofread it?
Right.
One last time, or copy edit it one last time?
Sure. And things like that just slip through the cracks sometimes. Sure. I totally get it. But it is a little bit of annoyance. Now, as a caveat to that bad rule book, this is something that I am very passionate about and I really wish would stop, and that is having gendered specific language in your rule books.
Specifically, single gender.
Yes, when it's always the player moves his pieces and he takes his turn. I don't understand in the year 2024 why we would continue to just assume that only men play board games.
Right, and I've definitely looked at rule books where they do switch back and forth, and in the examples there are either gender neutral names and pronouns, or they're flipping back and forth, they're representing everything.
Right.
But there are also games where it is just he.
Right. Well, a perfect example, we played Tokaido for the very first time very recently, and that rule book is consistent with he pronouns. And I just don't understand, because that is such a mass market board game. I don't know why you wouldn't just try to include more people in it.
Yeah.
Such a simple touch. It's easy to fix. So if you're writing a rule book, just try to make sure that it includes everybody.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. Bad rule books.
The second one is really about, it's one of the components.
Yeah.
One of the most important components, which is your player board.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So imagine that you're playing a game.
Okay.
That has several trackers on it.
Sure. Yeah, I love those.
So you might have cubes that are marking your place on this tracker,
right? Or
these multiple trackers. Yep. You might have cubes that are showing actions that you've taken, a variety of different uses for tiny cubes. If that player board isn't double layer,
oh gosh,
and the cat jumps on the table,
oh, no,
not providing a double layer player board, even as an option. I know that there are, levels of things that happen in a Kickstarter. Often that'll be like a stretch goal or something, but not having the option to have a double layer player board, especially if your game is on the longer side. I can understand if it's like a quick 20-30 minute play that you might not need it. But if you're playing a game that has a playtime of 40 minutes up to several hours, you're going to need to stand up and use the bathroom, refill your water, whatever. And that is an opportunity for the table to get messed up.
Right.
We have a toddler. We have 2 cats. There are people around, animals around the table, and the potential for chaos and for a game to be totally you lose the thread on it.
Right.
If those cubes get messed up, you just can't continue, and you don't want to be like 2.5 hours into a 3-hour game and not be able to finish it because the cubes got messed up.
Or just to have to be on the honor system and say, like, I think these were here.
Yeah.
And Terraforming Mars is really guilty of this. If you buy just the game out of the box, it is just that single layer player board that you're just tracking cubes on there. You brush your hand the wrong way,
and
all of a sudden all of that progress is lost, and hopefully you remember where you were.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Double layers fix that.
It really is a game changer, and like I said, it's just a pet peeve when it's not included, when it would be such a just like quality of life, quality of gameplay, simple thing to do.
For sure. So double layer playing boards, definite thing. I guess the next thing that I want to talk about is the game length.
Okay.
You and I both love a long game.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of games really try to call out when it's like, hey, this is the time that you're going to commit to this. So expect a game of 60 minutes, 120 minutes. I love that. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we absolutely make decisions on what we're going to play based on how much time we have. And I'm sure that a lot of you do as well.
Here's my caveat to that, and this is a big pet peeve of mine. When you include simultaneous play for reducing that game length of like, well, normally this would be like 30 minutes per player, but you guys can do these phases at the same time, so it's really like 20 minutes per player. Great idea in theory.
Or it's 30 minutes total, because even though you have 4 people, you're all doing the same thing at the same time, so that's 30 minutes.
Right. Great idea in theory, but one of the reasons that we love to play board games is because we like to converse. We like to see what other strategies people have come up with. So when you do that simultaneous play, especially when it comes to an element of scoring,
absolutely,
that really drives me crazy, because somebody will just basically finish up their turn and say like, okay, I scored 38 points.
It's like, how did you do that?
I want to see.
And also, especially when a game is very dense in strategy, we might be playing the game totally differently. And so I want to know what you did, so that the next time we play that, maybe I want to take that strategy. And vice versa. Maybe there's something that I missed that I could be doing that I'm never going to know if we're taking those turns at the exact same time, and I never get the chance to see it.
Right. Well, and I will say that a game that's really guilty of this is Dinosaur World.
Absolutely.
Where you get to the Jeeple phase.
The Jeeples.
And basically everybody's supposed to do that at the same time, and then you come back to it and you're like, okay, well, I adjusted all of this. Did everybody else? Great. I scored how many points? You scored how many points? That's the most exciting part, is seeing what people are scoring, seeing how they got there, seeing what boredom they got. And when you basically take all that and just put it on the honor system, I feel like you're subtracting a lot of the value of the game.
Absolutely.
So that's my next pet peeve, and that is simultaneous play and honor system scoring to reduce game length.
Next up is one that we actually experienced today playing a game. And that is not including a score pad or some kind of scoring mechanism in a game that
like
is
a track around the board.
Right, especially in something that is point heavy. Not every game needs something like that.
Sure.
If at the end you're only counting up, you're doing all of these things, but only one set, you're counting one set of numbers. But if you have to do any sort of addition, there should be some kind of pad or something included where you can move your pieces around on a tracker or something, like you said, something around the board. But not having that is just why? Why? I mean, obviously we have scratch paper, we have pencils, we can write it down, but it's such a small thing. And
it's such a nice touch to put in it. I tell you, the more egregious example to me of recent memory is Mosaic, A Story of Civilization. I think that game is amazing. It is so cool, but
it's such a wonderful game.
Here's the cardinal sin. You go through multiple scoring phases. I think you go through 3 scoring phases, and there is no way to track that score unless you have a pad and paper separate.
Right. And you have to keep track of it each time.
That is the core mechanism of the game, is you score at certain points. And it's just not there.
And for that game specifically, we have purchased a separate acrylic score tracker because it is just something that we think is cool. We really like that game. We'll use it.
And to all you Etsy shops out there that make things like this possible, so I'm not so annoyed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But, I don't know that we'll do that for every game that's like that. But today the game that we played was Architects of the West Kingdom. And I was a little bit shocked. I didn't remember that there wasn't a scoring pad,
Yeah.
but there's just several different categories that you're going through. And yeah, everybody can kind of keep track of it on their phone, but I feel like that goes back to that kind of honor system thing that we were talking about, where writing down everybody's categories is super helpful for being able to get an accurate score, and also for just really seeing how the game is playing out. And the joy of seeing who wins after you do all of that addition. There's something to that too.
Well, and it I think also helps, because if you just say, here's the scoring, everybody add up your score, what points did you get? That's not as exciting to me as like, okay, here's the first line of scoring, write all that down, then here's the second line. Just love that. Seven Wonders has nailed that scoring aspect. Everybody just copy that. It's done. It's perfect. Just do that.
Yeah.
All right, so that was not including a score pad. Huge pet peeve. Next thing on my list that really annoys me, and this really is something that can kind of break games, and that is having no iconography or text on the board.
Yes.
Oof. This is a bad one.
It's a really bad one.
Especially in mechanically dense games. You mentioned Architects of the West Kingdom. That game does a great job of having exactly what you need to do on the spot that you were doing it.
And having relatively simple iconography as well. I think that is a part of this, but the main focus of this is whether or not it is on the playing space.
Yeah. So we played a game, it's been a little bit now, called Casting Shadows.
Which is darling.
The art is
so
beautiful.
Cute.
It's neat, but overall, we came away not really liking the game, and a large part of it was due to this pet peeve. Every space that is set up on the board has its own ability. So if you start with your character in this space,
something
you
happens.
Get some sort of special ability. It is not on the board at all. So you have a single player aid for all the players.
That was going to be my other point with this, is that if you're going to do that, include more than one reference.
Right. And I think I understand what happened there. They have beautiful art, and so they didn't want to ruin beautiful art by putting text on it, but that makes your game unplayable.
It does. We play a lot of games. We're pretty good at playing games.
Yeah.
And we had a hard time getting through that one.
Right, because it was just like you had to keep your nose in the rule book or the player aid, because everything you did was like, okay, I'm starting my turn. What do you get here? I don't remember. Let's refer back to the rule book.
Exactly.
So that just drives me crazy. Again, when you get a game to the table, you want it to be easy to play. You want it to be easy to understand. So adding that iconography and text goes such a long way.
Absolutely.
All right.
You're
up.
Yeah, the last one that we're going to talk about this time is
Kara foreshadowing a future list, perhaps.
Maybe. Is something that is not always a problem for us, but I think could potentially make a game unplayable for some folks, depending on how much space you have, and that is games that are table hogs.
Yeah.
We have many games that have a lot of moving pieces that are very dense, that have multiple boards and trackers, plus multiple player boards. You have, as the single player, have a board and a tracker and have to do all of these resources and tableaus of cards. That takes up a lot of space.
Right.
And it's just a lot.
Yeah.
It's hard to manage. And sometimes if I'm having to reach across our 4-foot table, it's hard to actually play the game when you can't reach things, when things can't be just kind of in the center.
Right.
And I love a big game. I love the beautiful boards. I love all of the art that can be incorporated and all of the pieces and how tactile everything is. But sometimes making things so big, I think, just makes it hard.
Well, and I think the key point there that you mentioned is, if we were playing a game that's 2 players, we should be able to sit on the same side of the table and be able to reach everything.
Absolutely.
That's one thing that always drives me a little crazy, is that when we put a board between us and then we each have our own player areas, if there's still all the resources all the way across the table to grab onto, and you've got to overstretch your arms, it's just frustrating.
Well, and I mean, even thinking about that, if we're sitting on the same side of the table, if we have a million resources on the bottom of the board and my player space is relegated to an 8-inch width space on the edge of the table that is going up
Yep.
instead of having it, kind of like placemat style in front of me. Like that's
Right.
it's just an irritant.
Well, and I think the harder thing there is that there's not really any way to say, here's how big a game board is.
It's true.
Like maybe they could print that on the box, like here's the kind of space that you're looking for. I always kind of equate it to when you play a game in virtual reality, like for PlayStation, they tell you like, this is how much space you need in your living room to play it.
Right.
I kind of feel like there needs to be something like that for table space sometimes.
Yeah, especially if you have a game that is so big. Because what are people supposed to do if
Right.
if they're playing on something like a card table? I mean, I don't know, like
Coffee table.
or a coffee table.
Yeah.
There are some of these games that you legitimately cannot play
Right.
on a coffee table.
Right. You need a full-on dining table. And we are fortunate enough that we have one of those. We actually have a really nice Jasper table from All Play. And it is fantastic in that it's got a top that we can lift up, but then we're losing gameplay area when we do that. So for some of our larger games that we want to play over various nights,
we actually we can't really play it on the top.
Right. So we have to kind of condense our play areas down a little bit. But yeah, that's, I think, a very valid pet peeve. Because you can't tell that on the box how big it's going to be.
Right. And like I said, it doesn't break a game, but it just is a little bit annoying.
Yep. So those are our top 6 board game pet peeves. But we want to hear from you all. Is there something that grinds your gears when it comes to starting a brand new game?
Do you agree with our pet peeves? Are those things that you listen to it and you're like, yeah, that is annoying?
Well, and as Kara alluded to, this was just the first list that we came up with. There's a couple of other things that we've come up with that do drive us a little crazy. Maybe you're a little bit more specific.
Right.
So if you enjoyed this list, please do be sure to leave us a comment and let us know. If you did like it, we've got some other thoughts that we'd like to share.
Yeah, we'd love to share more with you about our board game pet peeves.
But in the meantime, I'm Adam.
And I'm Kara.
Thanks for stopping by.
Bye.